All right, welcome to The Stretch. Today on the show, we have Nate Marques. He is a MLB agent. We talked to him for like 50 minutes or so.
Oh, is that long?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
It was
We had a lot of questions.
Yeah, a long time. It was actually very interesting.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I had a good conversation. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. But until then, I do want to talk about our friends at Miller Lite. Went to the Cubs game this week.
Mm-hmm.
We had some nice Miller Lites, Country Club. It was flowing.
Murphy's pregame, Miller's, those, and like, it was a beautiful day. It was a perfect day for a nice cold Miller heading into the ballpark. A couple of Millers afterwards. It was that to me.
What was the weather like?
64.
Yeah,
Sunny.
The night was perfect.
It was.
Flags were not blowing at all.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Bottle it up.
Yeah.
I like Country Club. They go with the 16 ounce.
Those are nice.
That's a
yeah.
nice mix in for sure.
Those went down real smooth last night.
They did.
Yeah.
They always do. Yeah. So cheers to 50 years of Miller Lite, the great tasting light beer for people who love beer since 1975. The taste you can depend on. A great beer trusted by beer lovers for 50 years. The original light beer since 1975 and still iconic 50 years later. Miller Lite, great taste, 96 calories, and the official beer partner of the Chicago Bears. Go to MillerLite.com/stretch to find delivery options near you, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere that they sell beer. It tastes like Miller Time Chicago. Just make sure you celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
There he is.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Good. Before we start, I do want to thank White Sox Day for teaching me something.
Are we rolling? Let's just
We're
be
rolling.
rolling. Let's just be rolling.
We're rolling.
I didn't know that you can call on Twitter.
I
until
didn't
got a
know
phone
you
call
could
at
do
4
that
o'clock
either.
in the morning.
I didn't know you could call on Twitter. You can do it on Instagram, I know. You called him at 4 a.m.
I learned that from you.
That you called him?
Yes.
Well, let me introduce him. We have
Yes.
Nate Marques.
Marquez, yes.
Yes, Nate Marques. He's an MLB agent, and White Sox Dave called him at 4 a.m.
Apparently I did.
From Italy.
From Italy. I'm assuming it was some sort of pocket dial. I don't know how that happened, but I apologize. I don't mean to wake you up. I'm sure that I was the very last person that you would want to take a call from at 4 a.m. So I apologize, but here we are.
Well, I believe last episode, Chief didn't understand how money exchange works. So I thought maybe you guys didn't think how time difference was a thing, too.
Well, actually, we really don't.
No, I do understand how exchange rates work. Money doesn't count when you're abroad. That's how it works.
Oh.
Yes.
I do agree there after being abroad multiple times in the
Yeah.
last year.
What do you want me to do? Math? I'm not doing math
Yeah,
when I'm abroad. Just give them a card.
1,000 pesos fucking sold,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, Derek, thanks for joining us. We're going to get into kind of all the ins and outs. We can't obviously reference certain things directly because
Certain players. Yeah.
because you have clients, and that's just not how the world works.
Unless you want to do tampering. You want to do tampering? You'd be like, hey, I can get
I'll stay
player.
away. I like my license.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
Well, we can start there. How often does tampering in baseball actually occur?
Well, let's put it this way. One of my first MLB clients I had for about 48 hours before another agency took them away from me.
Okay.
Okay.
And can you turn around and like sue, be like, hey, that's some sort of breach of contract or what?
Not necessarily breach of contract, but there is MLBPA rules that, if I were to talk to another player that I don't represent, I have to let them know. So if I'm at a wedding and I'm sitting at a table with a player that's with a different agent, I actually need to let MLBPO know. And that's kind of where that question was, how did this all happen without being informed that, I had a client souped away from me within 48 hours of making his major league debut. But when you're a smaller agency, those are just things that kind of get brushed under the rug, I guess.
And how long have you been an agent, Derek?
Since 2017, COVID just messed up my math, so.
Got you. Okay. So 2017.
8 years. Yeah.
Understandably,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the name of your agency is?
Lake Ridge Sports Management.
Lake Ridge Sports Management. All right, cool. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the big thing we want to get into, just kind of like the nuts and bolts of and White Sox Dave, you could get into the collective bargaining and all that kind of shit because I know you're more read up on that than I am. But yeah, anything where you want to start with, Dave?
Not particularly. Obviously, we in this office right now, not me personally, but Ryan and Eddie are speaking of a particular player that the Cubs want to extend. I'm not going to name his name out.
Well, let's just stop. We'll stop you right there. We'll stop you right there.
Let me just ask you pretty broadly.
I just asked broadly, did I not?
No, not broad enough.
How broad do you got to be?
Pretty broad.
Pretty broad.
He likes his
Well,
license.
let's say there's a player that's becoming a free agent.
Yes.
And
Derek, tell him that was not broad enough.
Well, that's fine. It's you have it. It's a common question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so continue. Dan.
Right. I think you could say Blue Jay fans may have the same question.
Okay.
They signed one, but there's another one that is available. So we're not going to say any specific scenarios to a specific player. But when you have a young player approaching unrestricted free agency for the first time.
Mm-hmm. All right, continue.
Right?
There you go.
And I think every agency and agent is going to have a different strategy. Right. So for myself, I would like to think that the open market is probably going to offer more when there's a bidding war than re-signing with the current team. Especially where you've seen the past few off seasons, how outrageous the deals have gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really up to the player where, does he like his situation? And every player is different, his family, his wives, whatever that may happen, right? Does he want to stay put and, a couple $1 million doesn't make a difference to them? Or is it going to be another type of player where they know I only have so many unrestricted free agencies available to me, and I'm going to maximize and capitalize on the market. And it really depends on the client because every client's going to be different.
So does that make fans screaming over and over again about extending a guy a useless exercise because it just kind of makes no sense for the guy not to hit the open market and see where the bidding war opens at? Or is it like, no, like you should, that would be encouraged because things do happen midseason?
Listen, if the fans, show the love and the player's really comfortable where they're at, right? And he's like, I don't want to leave where I'm at. I already have a home. I like the time zone I'm playing in. I'm close to my family. I don't know where this bigger deal may come from. That may throw a wrench into the plan, especially if the player has young children and they're in school. Like there's a lot of other factors outside of the game that does cause a player to re-sign early.
Now this is obviously a hypothetical. Now you got hypothetically a top 10, 15 player in baseball with, he's on a beeline towards free agency and what could be a massive, massive deal. How as an agent, do you start initiating the contact with both the club and the player? Like, hey, we got to start, talking about this, or is it typically the players coming up to you being like, hey, I like my situation here, or hey, get me the hell out of here and get me the biggest contract? Like, what's the breakdown?
Well, you're having the conversation with your client, right? Mm-hmm. Even to know where the team's at. How close are we? We have our number, they have their number. How close are we in general, right? If the player says, I'm happy where I am. If I get X amount, I'm going to re-sign. I don't care about the open market. Or there could be other situations where it's like, I want to test the open market. Doesn't mean I won't re-sign here, but I want to see what my value is on the market before I make a decision.
How like I feel like you hear about this more in like the NBA and the NHL than MLB, at least from my experience. But how much does state taxes actually matter when you're going through these deals?
Huge.
Okay.
It really depends on how much money is going into your bank account every month, every week.
But does a player take less to go to a place that has no state tax? Or is it?
Yeah, we play that into a fact, right? I'm in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So we have the Canadian dollar, totally different, exchange rate, up here, right? So you got to put that into a fact where it's like, okay, what does this really equal into money coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. If you're taking 50% state tax in certain states, right, it's like that has to play a factor into that.
So when teams are offering or tendering a contract to any player, it doesn't matter. Say a team in Florida, no state income tax, or a team in Chicago or New York, high state income tax, or California or whatever. How often is it like of utmost importance to set AAV standards for the player? Or is it just like, hey, like I can make X in Texas even though the number might seem lower? I'm not setting the market, but like I'm making more in general.
It's a huge factor in many cases, right? Again, family, travel, home park, right? If you're a pitcher or a hitter, like where am I going to have bigger numbers to, potentially if you have another free agency year, right? If you're a pitcher, you may not want to pitch in high altitude or, a smaller ballpark that has a higher, chance of foul balls, the older ballparks like, Wrigley or Fenway, right? Where the old Oakland, stadium, there was yards and yards of foul territory.
Football fields, right.
Is negotiating mid-season as big of a pain in the ass as they lead the fans to believe?
It's just more, I'd say it's a pain, but teams and have more things going on, right? They're not just focused on re-signing. They have draft, they have their current roster. There are so many balls juggling. A lot of times they don't know what they're going to do till later on in the year, right? So it's not, instead of my strategy of negotiating is make both parties happy. I'm not trying to screw over the team to help the client because I need to work with this team in the future with other clients. I don't want to, there's only 32 teams in the league. I don't want to be blackballed by a certain team because I was difficult to deal with and hurt my client in the future.
Now, there are power agents out there that have this reputation of, I am going to hurt the team. I'm going to punish you. So how do you balance that where it's like, I'm just going to be a player guy only, and it's like my guys are good enough versus, because I'm sure if you have your superstars and then you have like your mid-tier guys, like that negative feeling could trickle down to the rest of your client list. So how do you balance like dealing with like your big time guys versus trying to have a good relationship so all of your clients benefit?
Great question.
To me, again, every agent has their own, strategy, their own personality in that regards, right? So to me, it's about, yes, if you're with the top end, you're at the highest player available and you can pretty much go sign wherever you want. It still doesn't mean you need to be a prick. And that's just my thinking personally, right? There's other agents that may have their own reasoning for their own strategy. I can't speak on that behalf on their reasoning.
So do you believe that there are certain agents that are blackballed by certain teams?
I can't say there is or there isn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was. But again, front offices change so frequently. So just because they were a quote unquote prick to a certain GM and they're gone doesn't mean that team is now blackballed because there's a whole new regime in there. So if they're blackballed, it's for a year or two until they clean house.
Now, I'm trying to figure out the most appropriate way to word this question. So obviously you just saw the two mega deals that were signed within the last year. So Ohtani and with Toronto, and like how does baseball find the balance of the teams like the White Sox right now who have an utter refusal to spend on anything of significance versus the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets, who do not have a limit to how much they will spend? Like, I'm of the opinion that you should never, like, there's a lot of people, fans in baseball, that they're putting the Dodgers, they're like, fuck the Dodgers, I hate the Dodgers, they're ruining baseball. I don't think so, because the Dodgers are operating within the rules and doing everything they can to win. And this is leading into my question about the upcoming CBA after next year. What can baseball do to find a balance where every team is trying to compete? Because the tanking, like we just saw in the last CBA, they were trying to like negate the tanking a little bit. I think it's gotten worse. Nothing is stopping teams, not even the draft. And you might have the worst record in baseball like the White Sox did last year, and you still have to pick 10th, So where do we find that balance from your perspective as a player agent heading into this next CBA?
Well, my job is to get my client the most money possible.
Yes.
It's not about, if a certain team doesn't want to spend money, they're only hurting themselves, right? My job is there's only so many contracts that a player can sign, and to maximize that amount. And if there's a certain team that's going to offer more, we're going to go to that team first because we know, you're going to potentially get more than another team, right? So it's really up to, the owners and the structure of that certain team. You see a certain team in Florida that they always have a low payroll, but they build through a system and they trade it away and they do well, right? And it works for them, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to spend to win, because you've seen it otherwise. You saw it with quote unquote Moneyball. You've seen it, with through pitching and through unique ways of doing it. So it's really up to the owner, and the organization. Can't say necessarily just the owner, but to make it available for their GMs to be competitive, or the GMs thinking outside the box and being competitive if their owners aren't paying, right? Because it has been done. It's difficult, a lot harder, a lot easier to buy a nice car than to build one.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, it is a good analogy. How do you, if you have a young guy coming up and he's established himself, but he's still a young player with multiple years left of club control, and the club comes with this offer where it's like, hey, you can sign like an 8-year deal here. You're not going to, or a 5-year deal, you're not going to maximize that value, but you're going to have some security. Where is the balance on the agent front? Do you ever like try to be like, hey, just make kind of peanuts relatively for the next few years and we'll crush it? So how do you judge that situation versus the short term kind of security versus waiting out for like getting like that Powerball winner?
Well, what I always say is, I'm never going to make a decision for a player. My job is to present the pros and cons and support whatever decision they may make. But if it's, let's buy a couple years into arbitration, but you're going to get more money sooner and you're not getting paid, small percentages above league minimum, that's up to the player's decision. Here's the pros, here's the cons, right? Because there's injuries in the game, guys get DFA'd, there's that negative side of it too, right? So it's like, you don't know what tomorrow may be. So you kind of here's the signing now, or her benefit of let's take a little bit less and hit our arbitration and hope for a bigger payday once arbitration comes. But, and then again, up to the player's decision, and you support it.
Hey, let's pause for a second because I got to hear about row.co. Chief,
I'll tell you about row.co. Please. Row Sparks, guys, that's the go-to now. It's a 2-in-1. You get stronger, harder erections. They hit the bloodstream faster. It's like a little lozenge, like almost like a candy. You put it right underneath your tongue, dissolves. You're hard and ready to go in 15 minutes. So they give you that thicker, longer erection than you usually have. They get fuller. That's blood flow, baby. That's how it works. So Row Sparks gives you the boost to last longer, so it's more fun for both of you. Row stays active in your system for up to 36 hours. Go back to back to back, multiple rounds. Great time. Great time for everybody involved. So be ready for play with Row Sparks. With Row Sparks, you can get that erection that you always wanted. Row connects guys with a medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversations. You don't have to look a doctor in the eye. So it's with in-person providers. If approved, treatment ships directly to your door. It's a great method, so make sure you're getting on it. If prescribed, new sexual health patients get $15 off a Row Sparks on a recurring plan. Connect with a provider at row.co/stretch to find if prescription Row Sparks are right for you. That's row.co/stretch for $15 off that first order. How ugly do those arbitrations get?
Again, personally, you prefer not to want to go into it because, the player needs to understand the team's trying to, what's the word I'm looking for, justify the number that they're looking for and downplaying the negatives to the player. And we're doing the opposite. Yeah. Right. We're trying to get the arbitrator to go with our number and support a stronger case why our comparables are merit, right? So it is a little bit of a weird, awkward situation. And with baseball, the arbitrator does have to pick one number or the other. Yeah. I know there's other sports where the arbitrator can come up with a third number, right? When it comes to baseball, it's, either the team's number or the player's number, right? But again, the player needs to have a thick skin, and you have to be prepared and prepare your client for what may or may not be said during an arbitration.
Does the player have to be there?
Yeah, I was just about to ask that same thing.
It's their choice.
Okay.
But it's gonna, you're gonna share what happened.
Yeah.
With your client.
What
right? Because you don't want it finding out through the media. So they said, I always try and make sure that they're as informed as much as possible.
Does the media go to those?
Or anything.
No.
No.
I don't believe. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I missed the question?
Is the media ever present in the arbitration
No.
hearings? No.
No.
Okay.
So it'd have to be through a leak or something like that.
Yeah, and there's leaks all the time.
Which would be
All
a
the-
team leak typically,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you're not going to be leaking,
No.
right?
No.
Just on being an agent, what percentage of your week or year goes towards recruiting new potential clients? Because you can't necessarily steal them, so it's almost like you have to be finding young guys, or so like how do you get guys on your client list, and what does that look like?
So a lot of times it's through referrals of your other client.
Okay.
Right. I do spend a bit of time recruiting when it comes to the NCAA for the draft, right, and getting them from that point, right, and starting them right from day one, right. But when it comes to in season, it's, again, we don't have a list of who's available and who's not available. Right. So it's not like, oh, these people are working with an agent. These people aren't happy with their agent. You don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So sometimes it's a matter of, you're having a client that talks you up to a teammate that may not be happy with his representation or isn't being represented. Right. So you don't know. But, there's no hard percentage. I think where I spent the most time is, recruiting and trying to build on the draft and getting them through that way, and then being their advisor and then agent from day one.
And has all the NCAA legislation and the NIL and all that, has that changed how you operate as well, now that you can contact a collegiate or even high school kid?
Well, we always could, right? Because baseball was different.
Right. That's right. In baseball, it's different. Right.
Right. So there was no limitation of that, which is interesting in that aspect, where it's like there's so many different rules with, MLB to NBA to NFL.
It's weird, right?
In that regards. But yeah, we never had any limitations to working with it. NIL is a big difference. In NCAA baseball, you don't see the kind of the big paydays you do in football and basketball, right? So it is more unique in that situation where players are getting, smaller amounts, more just scholarship paid for. With their NIL normally comes from P4 schools.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any orgs where if you had a player of yours getting drafted to, where you're just like, damn, my job just got a lot harder?
And you don't have to say them, but
Yeah.
Not really. You just know, like anything, there's certain organizations that they're building their minor league system to trade them at deadlines to get the bigger names. And then there's other organizations that, you have a better chance of making it because they're not known to be signing the big ticket free agent. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, so it's different, right? Because every organization runs differently, but even there's certain organizations that they may not be known to have a good, strong minor league system, but they're still going to have players today that are all-stars that come through their system.
But it is of a benefit to you for a team, for one of your young players to go to a team that's known for development. So you would maybe do like a little quiet fist pump if your guy got drafted by one of those teams.
I like to do fist pumps on, certain organizations that have a better relationship with.
Okay.
Right. And that's just a better communication, right? So if there's a certain GM or minor league coordinator that I can pick up the phone and I know he's going to return my call and it's not hassling, right? Because I've had stories where it's like, poor minor league player, had found a stapler in a sandwich and cut the inside of his mouth, and we need to have something done, right? So if it's an organization where it's hard to get a hold of somebody, it's more of a pain in the butt opposed to other organizations where, they're on it and they're going to take care of their players.
On the topic of mega deals that are being signed right now, what strategies would you say that you use to guarantee to get your client guaranteed money for performance-based bonuses, et cetera, versus just hunting for that big fish?
So, I already have the fish, right, in this situation.
Yeah. Well, big fish contract that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, it's about, comps, right? Where's he at? Where's he comp to be? What are other players being paid? Right? Do I have the number, or in this scenario, do I have the number one player where it's, I'm talking about, I'm comparing him to an outfielder with the Dodgers, and that's the market, right? And I'm pushing the envelope even larger, or am I somewhere in between?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to justify, no matter if it's the mega deal or a smaller deal, you have to justify your number and say, here's what we want and here's why we think we deserve it. We're not just going to say, oh, I want this number because I, used an app on my phone and that's how much number, the amount came.
Yeah.
How often?
That's it. I'm not going to pick a number out of left field.
Yeah. How often do you use the media and like little things like mystery teams and little things like that to kind of drive up interest, or is that like an actual common practice that agents will use? Like a little
some may, some I don't.
You don't do that. You're all straightforward.
That's illegal as far as I'm aware, correct?
Yeah. I would love to be a pawn.
That I was about to offer my services, to the ethos, not to you, just out there for other agents that may be listening. If you want to use me as a little media pawn, I'm available.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
But you got to build up credibility. You have to get like 5 things right in a row, and then you do some big like.
And you got to be prepared for 4 a.m. calls on Twitter.
Yeah,
prerequisite for sure.
Pocket dials. It has how bad have analytics gotten over the? I mean, you've been around since 2017, licensed agent, so not since the advent of Moneyball and analytics. But like, do analytics hurt or help your job? Would you say?
I'm pro analytics.
Okay.
But I'm also a factor of there's analytics and then there's the eye test. Mm-hmm. You have to take a little bit of each.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm not a fan of, situations of like, oh, we're going to pull this pitcher because it's third time through the order. And, stats say that, the guy's hit more the third time through the order if he's pitching a one hitter. Right. It's like if he has his stuff that night, let him go. Like you have to throw analytics out the door, but there's a time and a place for both.
When the Ohtani deal obviously like shocked the world, and especially because of the deferred money aspect, were you like, wow, what a brilliant chess move? Or you're like, oh no, that's just a special circumstance where he was willing to take the deferred money and the Dodgers were able to do it?
Kudos to his agent because you never even really saw it, right? Thought of it, right? And kudos to the player to say, I'm going to take so much more money after I'm done playing. It's, not any player is going to accept that kind of deal.
Do you think we'll see more of it?
It's a copycat league, right? It's out there. Agents like myself that never thought of it, now that's another arsenal in our tool bag, an option to try and get that. Now, going back to White Sox State question about the CBA, and we don't know, if it goes towards, I'm going to say the C word, the cap, where you see it in other leagues. I'm not saying baseball's going to have it or not have it, but if that's something that does, in the future, not saying this CBA or whatever, I don't know how that's going to play into it. I don't know.
What are the chances the MLBPA ever accepts any sort of hard cap aside from the luxury tax, which kind of sort of has acted like a hard cap to the owners anyways? Is that anything?
I can't really answer that. I know that the MLBPA will not. We would not be pro cap.
No, not at all. And nor should you guys. Yeah.
Even if there's a floor attached to it. So if you have a cap and maybe it's a soft cap, but you get that floor.
I've heard that teams don't want it. Well, from the player angle, that if there is a floor, that will entice teams just to spend to the floor and nothing more. So that will kind of like the floor will act like the cap. That's like the argument against it.
That's what hockey has. Mm-hmm. Like hockey has a floor and football has a floor. I don't know if,
but it's within like 3 or 4% of each other. So
hockey's a lot a bigger gap.
The Yankees, Dodgers, Mets will never, ever, ever agree to that. But the Rays, the White Sox, absolutely. So that was where I wanted to bring the whole conversation full circle. Because in the last CBA negotiations, and I'm not even talking about the 2020 Mickey Mouse season, the 60-game season, it was very clearly players against owners. Now it's looking like it's going to be owners versus owners, similar, and I don't remember this. This is what's been told to me. But back in '94, which I'm sure you remember much better, it was owners versus owners, and that obviously was probably the worst thing that could happen in baseball aside from the 1919 World Series is a canceled World Series, Mm-hmm. So how bad is it going to get in a season and a half from now?
I said, I don't want to strike, my players wouldn't get paid. Right. So, we don't never want it to get to that point. We, again, like anything, we want both ends to be happy. Like any negotiation, the owners are going to have to give up something. The players are going to have to give up something. It's happened at every negotiation through every CBA and every sport. right? You just hopefully that, they're unified and they don't have any internal differences, and it won't be a difficult, negotiation. And baseball, I think I was around in 94, not necessarily as an agent, but as a fan, and it hurt the game.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the game just keep on getting better and better. And we're at a good place now. And I wouldn't want to see it take a step backwards if there's another 1994 in our hands.
But
do you think the game is better and better? Because and this could just be a nostalgia factor, but when I think back, 20, 30 years ago, it felt like the stars were a bigger deal in baseball than they are today. Like they're either marketed differently, but now it just seems like it's hyper local and everybody is just kind of about their own guys and their own team, where it felt like it was more national a generation ago. Would you agree with that or no?
I would disagree. I think baseball's always been local. And again, I'm coming from a market where in Toronto, it is national in regards to only one team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But growing up, I'm 45 years old. Like, Ken Griffey was a great player, but you didn't see him in every commercial.
Yeah.
Right. He wasn't the Michael Jordan of baseball.
That's true.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you just like today, you have star players, they're going to be ads in their local area, but you're not going to see a brand have a national ad with the baseball player. And the last one I really remember, again, there could be ones after this, but is the Chicks Dig the Long Ball with Tom Glavine and John Smoltz.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I was just thinking Big Mac with McDonald's and Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa when Sammy's eating the like
right. So yeah, it's I would love to see that, who's going to be that player to be that face, but right now it's baseball is triggered to a local market.
Yeah.
Obviously this is outside your realm to an extent, but being in the game, I'm sure you can offer some sort of, I don't know, words of wisdom, I guess, but the TV deal. I can't watch the White Sox without literally stealing their product right now with a VPN. That's how I have to watch the White Sox.
There's other ways.
Well, there's other ways to do it, but
the local, like the
easiest way for me to do it,
the regional sports networks are dying.
They're dying. So, how can we fix that so, you can stream your team locally when you want to stream your team?
And that's something I never really understood. Listen, again, I'm from just outside Toronto. I grew up a Buffalo Bills fan, right? In the late 90s, if they didn't sell out, I couldn't watch the game, even though I was 3 hours away.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Ridiculous, right?
And it's sometimes now, again, with hockey up here, it's a little different where if you don't live in the local market, you get blacked out, right? So I can't watch a Montreal game because I'm blacked out because I don't live in the Montreal area. Right. So there's two different ways of blacking out. It kind of doesn't benefit the fans or growing the game either way.
No. That is my issue with it. It's like you are actively making it harder for people to consume your product. And I'm not a business guy, obviously, but it doesn't make sense to me. And like, I want to be able to take my remote, turn on the TV, and watch a baseball game. And like, in the year 2025, it's more difficult than it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
No, but you can still get like the MLB app and that stuff. Or is that also blacked out?
No, I that's what I use, the MLB app and a VPN because I have T-Mobile.
I mean, if you didn't have a VPN, you couldn't watch it?
Nope.
Correct.
It's not...
I had to buy a VPN.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I think the MLB app has gotten better from that respect, from what I understand.
I thought the local
sucks.
teams are still blacked out.
No, local teams, yeah.
Maybe
It's
since
on
there's-
MLB app.
Maybe.
Yeah. Now I think we're 20 years now. You mentioned how the Blue Jays are a national team. We're 20 years since the Expos left. Are you an ad?
Killed them.
What's that?
94 is what killed them.
Yeah.
They're the number one team in baseball.
Yeah,
when that
them, the
happened.
White Sox, Yankees that year, yep.
And one more time, this show is brought to you by Body Armor Sports Drink. Body Armor has great tasting flavors like strawberry banana and orange and mango with no artificial dyes, flavors, or sweeteners. We got them right here. It's one of the best perks. You walk in, you're always hydrated. You'll never have a dry mouth day because of these beautiful sports drink body armors.
I always used to have dry mouth days.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Which do you like? What's your favorite flavor?
I like the one you got right there.
Strawberry banana?
Oh, yeah.
That's good stuff. Peach mango is great.
Mm-hmm.
Orange mango, excuse me. They're good. I was having trouble with. I was gonna have to ask you to open this for me.
I was really hoping you did. God, you sicken me.
Let
but
the
you know
people
it doesn't
know
sicken
that
me.
it is easy to open.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very easy to open. It's a very standard twist off.
I had no grip on it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, his hands are a little sweaty.
Maybe a little too hydrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perhaps you are.
For sure.
That is the very first thing I do. Every single morning I walk to the office, I go through the front doors and straight to the body armor.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Literally the first thing I do.
I got it. It's a tough week of opening things for me.
It really is. Yeah.
In a bold new look with the same great taste, get your Body Armor today at Walmart or a local grocery store near you. Body Armor. Choose better.
Are you an advocate for further expansion in baseball?
I don't know if it's expansion. I don't know if it's just relocation. I think there's certain markets that I think would do really well. You know, the one market I hear often is Nashville. I've never been, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I heard that would be a really great because they really support their AAA team, right?
And the college team.
Yeah. So I have Vanderbilt. Yeah, Vanderbilt is huge
Mm-hmm.
there as well. So, you know, it's just you do kind of get a watered down product whenever there's expansion in any league. Right. But, you know, I think right now there are certain places where it's like, okay, will this team work better, you know, over here, as opposed to, you know, just keep on adding more teams.
Okay. I was curious on your thinking on that, because as an agent, that means if you go to 32 teams, that's what, 52 more jobs.
Yeah.
And 52.
Well, as an agent, yes, you know, there's more teams, more money, but then again, does it hurt the game in the long run where there's not as much money?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So you see both sides of it, right? Yes, you know, it adds more jobs, right? But is there enough money bringing in if the overall product isn't top tier?
Yeah. And if you can't figure out your TV packages
It's insane.
Yeah.
Is there like a certain way that you think these early contracts should be structured? Because when you look at them, and I just can't, I think it really sucks for these guys who are hitting the open market for the first time at 30.
Yeah.
You know, like to me, it should be like a 26 or 27, like no matter what, college, no college, whatever. I don't know.
It's almost like the NHL. You have your entry level deal, which is 3 years.
NBA does that too, I think. Yeah.
They do something similar to that too. Like you have a 3-year deal where you're making a standard. I think the hockey is right now $925K for 3 years, and then you become a restricted free agent, but you can get like the big contract after 3 years. Is that something that will be negotiated in the CBA, you think?
They're tried to.
I would love to see that. Yeah, I would love to see, you know, my young players not have 7 years of control time.
And that's the exact question that is the perfect follow-up. The service time issue. How do we get rid of it so the best players who are deserving and lighting up AAA, AA, single, whatever, how do we get them on the opening day roster so teams and organizations stop messing with their service time? Because that, like, baseball's pissed me off so much right now because it's very clear that there are teams that want to win and teams that don't care about winning. And I'm of the opinion that the best 26 players in the organization should be on the opening day roster every single year, no matter what. And the teams, they like to play this stupid service time game and give them that fourth-year ARB eligibility, hurt the player in the long run because they're, you know, controlled for 7 years. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it.
It's
I
horrible.
never really
It's
understood
horrible.
it.
It's bad for the game.
Yeah.
It's the owners. You know, it's them. I don't want to say creating a loophole or anything, but it's them gaming the system so they don't have to pay a guy.
And again, that's something that's always, you know, there on the MLB side to get rid of, right? And we're not a fan of, you know, I don't want to speak for, you know, I'm only a certified agent of the PA, I'm not part of the PA, right? I'm not in those negotiations, but yeah, that is something that, you know, us as an agent, you know, do not want to have available, you know, because it only hurts our client.
Mm-hmm. It's like, that's like all of this stuff that we're talking about right now. It's like back to my question a few minutes ago. It's looking like that next CBA is going to be beyond ugly. And I think that baseball is in a spot right now where it is hurting a little bit, and I don't want to see it hurt more. And like you add that, you know, the service time issues, these mega contracts, owner versus owner. I just think we're in store for a very, very, very ugly offseason 26-27.
Well, let's hope that White Sox Dave isn't part of the negotiation and there is no strike in that regards.
Yeah.
Well, my immediate demand from if I were the player rep for the White Sox, what is it, 2 per team?
Yes.
2 per. If I was one of them, my immediate demand would be what?
Don't know.
You guys make fun of me for it all the time. I'd want
open the books.
Owners to open the books. What are the chances you guys can, or not you guys because you're not in the MLBPA, but like the MLBPA can get them to actually do that one day?
It's difficult, right? Like any business, there's always creative ways to
hide money. Shell companies.
Yeah. So
my last question, I don't know if you guys have anything else. My last question is, obviously we could talk about the contracts that are done, Soto, Ohtani, 700, and Vlad just got 500. If you looked into a crystal ball, let's not say who, let's not name anybody, but is there someone that gets a $500 million contract this summer or this coming winter, excuse me?
Plays great right field, steals bases, power. Baseball guy.
There's going to be teams, we've mentioned it before, that if they felt like they need this player and doesn't cost any amount, it could get done, right? I'm not going to say yes or no, because when there's a bidding war for a player, they're just driving that price up, and as an agent, we like to see that.
Yep. How long does a contract like that take to get nailed down?
It depends. You want to prolong it in a way where you have the interest, you drive it up, but there's also such thing as waiting too long. And I think you've seen it in certain deals in the past where it backfires, and teams kind of we need to sign somebody, right? So you kind of have that whole domino effect where it's like, okay, that first person sets the market, right? And we see where things are at. And then sometimes you kind of see situations where players end up not signing because teams just have to spend money elsewhere because they can't afford to just wait, right? You're going to see that right now in the NFL with Aaron Rodgers, right? The Giants kind of like, well, we need to sign somebody. We can't wait on your decision.
Yeah, and the Steelers are willing to wait. So.
As an agent, when you saw that $700 million deal inked, were you seeing dollar signs for your own wallet yourself?
Well, no, because he's not my client.
Well, of course, he's not your client, but you're going to be using him to compare to others, right? He's an outlier, obviously, but yeah.
Right. So if you're working with one of those top tier players, yes, right. I'm not going to go to the table with a guy that just made the 40-man roster and use that $700 million as a comp.
Yeah.
For sure.
Is that number? Is there a number that's so outrageous where it's just like you can't use it as a comp?
No, it's not about the number, it's about the stats, right? If the analytics going back to that, right? So if I have a player that his analytics are comparable to this player, and that's how much he's making, we're only using the $700 million comp because our stats are comp to their stats.
Yep.
Right. So we feel that's why analytics is a pro for our game, because it makes it so much easier to compare.
When you have a pending free agent, are there like sharks kind of circling in the waters where like you'll have team X will check in and be like, hey, how's that negotiation going? Because we are interested come this winter.
Not really. I think teams are pretty good in regards to respecting that aspect.
Okay.
Right. But now we do have, with the MLB, a 5-day window right after the final out to the World Series before free agency opens.
Yep.
Right. So it's not like the other sports where, hockey, it's July 1st, right? Where it's, it was when there's like, how does a player get signed at 12:01 when there's no tampering, right? When the guy's been a free agent for a minute, right? At least with baseball, we don't have a hard date. It's just 5 days after the final out of the World Series. That's when free agency opens.
Here's a question that I've wondered on the international front for a few years. So, Shohei Ohtani left money on the table. He could have, at what's the age, 26, where you don't have to pay a posting fee? Is it for Japanese players or what? He left money on the table coming a year or two early, where he could have inked like a $200 million deal at the time or whatever it was, and didn't, and opted to just go through the standard arbitration process and all that. But is there a way for agents and organizations to kind of make a, say the Texas Rangers just hypothetically are out of pool space, but they want this international player to be like, hey, sign here for this amount this year, then we'll extend you next year for $200 million. Is there a way around that? I don't know if that question exactly made sense, but
But it's it. To me, I would never take it as an agent because it's not written. You don't know, right?
Sure, yeah.
You know, would you sign a deal with Barstool for $1 if they say, "Oh, next year we'll sign you $200 million"? It's like, well, they could also leave you tomorrow.
Maybe.
Right? Or that conversation never happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have nothing. So I'm going. You know, we want something guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to do something on good faith.
Yeah.
Because good faith don't pay bills.
Do you think there's a balance, and this will be my last question heading into the CBA, because it seems like the current setup doesn't really benefit either side perfectly, because you'll see guys reach free agency for the first time at 29 or 30, and then they'll sign a 10-year deal where the last 3 years of that deal you're paying maybe potentially $25-30 million a year for nothing. So wouldn't it behoove of the owners also to start that clock earlier so they're paying for actual production as opposed to just being like the last 3 years are effectively a write-off?
I think it's just they're like, oh, that's 7 years down the road. We don't got to worry about that.
Yeah,
Penny-wise,
maybe
pound
he
foolish.
gets hurt. Maybe we can trade him. Maybe we can trade off his deal. Get it off the books later. Right? It's tomorrow's problem.
Okay, so they're not interested in that, because that always seemed like, yeah, you sign a guy to a 12-year deal, but he's the last 5 years is going to be 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. But
again, even as an agent, I'm driving his price up because he's going to have more years of him in his prime.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Derek, thanks for joining us. Anything else that we didn't get to here?
No, just, White Sox, Dave and Eddie, I am also a member of the Hair Transplant Club.
Oh, let's go.
Let's do it. Beautiful.
Right? I didn't go to Turkey. I kind of stayed local. But, it's still here. So I hope you guys have, success with your
I was talking this morning. Mine's pretty much fully in now. Little left to go, and I just can't wait to be the most insufferable human on earth this summer.
What I say, it's like a garden, right? They had to plant the seeds, and it takes a bit for it to grow. And that waiting period is probably the hardest.
We're at the 6 month mark or 5 month mark now.
Yeah, well, they say 12 months.
Yeah.
So by 12 months, you got what you got.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else you want to get out there where people could check you out or anything like that?
Is it the Leafs year?
I'm probably the number one non-Leaf fan around, so I would say no.
Okay,
go
great.
Panthers, go.
Go Cats.
In that aspect, but I am Canadian, so we're hoping for a Jets-Oilers Western Conference final.
All right, fair enough.
Beautiful.
But yeah, you can, we're Lake Ridge Sports Management. You can find me on Twitter, just Derek Marques. We're on Instagram with LSM Baseball. So, just shoot me up. I'm really just good just talking to players to kind of see what their chances are. I will give time to anybody to have a conversation with them.
Awesome. Derek, thanks again, man. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you,
Thanks
Derek,
for
and
having me.
apologize for the 4 a.m.
Yeah.
call.
But hey, I learned something. I was like, why is WSD calling me at 4 a.m. and how is he calling me? He doesn't have my number. So
I saw,
now know
I
you can
looked
make
at my phone.
audio
It's like,
calls on Twitter.
called Derek Martin. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it rang for a while. He was really anxious to talk to me at 4 a.m.
That would have been 11 a.m. My time, 10 a.m. because you would have been 6 hours ahead, and I would have probably still been wine drunk at that point. So, apologies.
No worries. I'm off to watch the Champions League semifinal.
Same.
There you go.
Allays.
Thanks,
All
Derek.
right. Goodbye.
Appreciate it, Derek.